Video on, audio recording. Now, this past weekend was my ride to BC. We were supposed to go down through Turner Valley and Black Diamond down to Crow's Nest Pass, Barwood, Fernie to Cranbrook. We ended up detouring actually and going down through we went down to Cochrane, and then we turned onto Highway 1 and then down 93 through Radium and ended up in Cranbrook that way, which I think ended up being a lot more scenic. Maybe cruised a little quicker than I would have liked, but we got there without any major incidents. The guys kind of got a talking to by an off-duty cop and kind of gave them a scare. That slowed them down for, I think, the rest of that day, which was only about an hour. Then, day 2 started with us having to find a key because Uber had broken his key off in his saddle lock. He managed to get the piece out, so at least we had a whole key to work with and didn't have to get a locksmith to come out and, you know, actually file a key or, you know, almost pick the lock kind of thing. When we went to Canadian Tire, they actually had the old style with the 2 clamps and, you know, the guide and the old school way of doing it from like 20 years ago. And the closest key we could figure that might work was a trunk key from like a 87 Ford Taurus. Anyway, it was about, I think it was 1:45 when we finally filled up the tanks and hit the road from Cranbrook. And we got to Creston and turned up 3A and started going down the road. It was fairly nice at the beginning, but the closer we got to the ferry, it just became a beautiful road to ride. I mean there was, I don't know how many turns there would have been per kilometer, but I'll bet you there was had to have been at least probably 10 per kilometer. Like, it was just awesome. It was almost like you were just constantly going through sweepers and cornering through, and it was getting your confidence up and leaning the bike over, and it was beautiful. So we had, I guess, almost probably an hour, maybe 45 minutes of really nice sweepers. And then when we were almost to the ferry, and I was being way overconfident, well, not way over, but you know, I was pretty confident in my leaning the bike over, and I went into one corner that was, you know, the speed limit at that point, once you get past or come up to the last village or whatever before you go, the speed limit changes to 60 kilometers an hour and stays there. So you kind of have to take your time and not be too terribly aggressive in your cornering, because, well, then you'd be speeding, and in BC they like to take away your bike or your vehicle if you're going 40 over. So we were being pretty good. I think we were only doing about 10 over most of the time. Might have been a couple of squirts where we went above that, but the guys let me lead, and, well, I don't like to speed much. So anyway, we came up to about the third to last corner, I believe, and you know, all the corners previous, it had said, you know, slow to 60 or slow to 50. And the ones that were bad said slow to 40. And we actually had one that said slow to 30. And it was particularly tight. So, you know, we were heeding those ones. But the ones that just said slow, we basically slowed down to the speed limit and went through the corner. Well, this one I didn't see any speed marking, because usually it said slow, and then there was a little sign under that had a speed on it. You know, would have the slow sign, and then a little square one would say 50 kilometers or 40 kilometers or whatever. But this one just said slow. You know, I mean, it could have been that sign somebody had pulled off, or maybe I just didn't see it. I'm fairly certain it wasn't there, though. Long story short, went into the corner at about, I'm going to guess we slowed to about 65 for this corner. Fairly certain that's what we were doing. As soon as I got up to the corner, I was still going a little bit straight. There was a couple things I had done wrong already at this point. In my approach, I was on the left side of my lane. When you're turning left, you should approach the corner from the far right side of the lane so that you can start at the outside of your corner, go to the inside and clip your apex, and then go to the outside, and it kind of stretches out the corner so it's not quite as sharp on a bike. We were riding in formation, and I was unsure how close the guy behind me was because, well, I wasn't probably going as fast as they would have liked to in between the corners. I'm sure I was going just as fast as they wanted to in the corners, but so I was a little nervous to move to the outside in case it was too close for him and made him nervous. I just figured I would just take the corner at a little bit slighter, sharper lean angle, and I would be fine. So anyway, I went into the corner, saw that the corner was a decreasing radius, which means it got tighter as we went through. It was a little bit of a hairpin, so it was a little slightly more than a 180. Kind of came back towards itself a bit as it completed. And anyway, I slowed off a little bit more before I leaned over, so I dabbed the brakes, which usually will drop you 5 or 10 kilometers an hour fairly quickly. And just got to set my cruise control here before I get too carried away. Anyway, once I got into the corner, I realized it was decreasing radius because I hadn't figured that out. I just saw that it was tighter than I thought. I rolled off the throttle, which on a V-twin, usually engine braking is pretty strong, and on my bike, it's almost like hitting the brakes. So I probably dropped a few more kilometers. So I'm guessing now I'm going at about 50 kilometers an hour. And my only other course of action was just to lean the bike over as far as I could to get around the corner. And I thought, okay, I can do this. And I basically just slam it over as far as I figured I could. And about midway through the corner, well, probably 3/4 of the way through the corner, yes, somewhere in there, the peg dragged. And it startled me because I'd never leaned the bike over that far. And that little wiggle just made me go back out wide again. I went right out to the line, and that's when I saw the gravel. And the bike basically, I mean, it wasn't abrupt like all of a sudden, zoom, gone. It just kind of skidded out and laid down. And I believe it was my shoulder and my wrist that hit the ground. And then I tumbled forward, and that's when the top right of my forehead on my helmet scuffed the ground, and I did one tumble. And I was in the gravel at this point. I think my helmet scuffed on the concrete, and my jacket hit the concrete. Or the asphalt, I guess. It's not concrete. Yeah. So once I did that, I was sliding through gravel, and when I finished my tumble, I actually was on my hands and on my toes of my boots, just sliding backwards. And I only slid off the road. It was less than 10 feet for sure that my head was. So, you know, I guess I must have slid about 15 feet total to the bottom of my feet. So there's no way I could have been going very fast. Otherwise, I would have slid considerably further. And, you know, immediately I stood up and kind of assessed my pain. See where the sore spots were, if anything was broken, if I'd badly hurt myself. And, you know, I was amazed. I had essentially no scratches. I have a little bit of scratches on the back of my left wrist from where my jacket rode up a little bit. and I must have rode up about 2 or 3 inches. So I've got, and I mean, it's not bad at all. It just looks like not even as bad as wiping out on a bicycle. And of course, by the time I stood up, Uber and Faz had already passed me, and they were all parking their bikes and yelling back, seeing if I was okay. And of course, I pretty much was. My left ankle was sore, but I could put full weight on it, so I was pretty confident I hadn't broken it, which I haven't. It's mad at me, but I can walk around. I'm hobbling, but I'm good. But then I turned and looked at the bike, and the headlight was pointing in the different direction than the wheel. Front wheel was flat. Mirrors were all wonky. The windshield was shattered. Chunks were missing off of it, and it was laying on its side. And as I got closer, I could tell the heat shield on the left side exhaust was crushed, and parts of it had blown apart. Then we stood the bike up to see if anything was leaking or any of that, because the oil tank or the oil reservoir is on the left side of the lower left side of the motor. So I was a little concerned that might have gotten ground down, but there's a couple of scuffs on it, and that's it. There was not even any real major scratches, so I was really thankful for that. The other thing I noticed when we stood it up is the shifter lever, the bit that goes on under your toe, or I guess above your toe. It had snapped off. The only other thing I saw that was visibly damaged was the air filter cover has a slight dent and is scratched up. So it obviously, I think the bike must have laid over when it, or maybe because it didn't lay over really hard. I don't know, but hardly anything really got damaged. I was really shocked. Because when I first saw it down in the gully, I thought, oh crap, it's a write-off, it's toast. But then, after a little bit closer evaluation, like we fired the bike up and got it out of the ditch, and stood it up and had a quick look, and the rotors weren't cracked. There was no fluids leaking at all. It still ran just fine. The only real issue was the steering. The left fork is bent, and the forks were twisted. So obviously the headlight is pointing off to the right and the tire is going straight. I don't believe the handlebars got bent, but I'll have to check that when I go pick it up this weekend. But it was, I don't know. Everybody asked me, was it scary and all that stuff, and really, I thought I had it handled, even though, I mean, obviously the whole issue was driver error. I misjudged the corner. I should have gone in at least 10 kilometers an hour slower. I'm going to make this late. If I'd have gone in at 40, I wouldn't even be talking about this. I'd still be riding my bike, commuting to work. We would have had an awesome weekend. It was still pretty good, but obviously there was issues. And I don't know, it was frustrating, more than it was scary, and any of that stuff. Because I mean, the scary part was seeing the corner decreasing and knowing you're going in too hot and leaning over. But I leaned it over and I thought, oh, I've got this. And then I saw the gravel. And just for that split second, it wasn't a, oh my God, or a scream. All I thought was, ah, crap. And that was it. Next thing I knew, I'm not on the bike anymore. And I'm sliding through gravel. So